Grief has a strange way of staying with people. Sometimes it fades slowly. Sometimes it lingers, quietly, in the background of everyday life. But sometimes, grief does something impossible. This story begins 3 years after a woman named Emily Carter died in a car accident. Her husband, Daniel Carter, had already learned how to live without her. Or at least, that's what he thought. Because one cold November morning, a letter arrived, and the handwriting on the envelope belonged to his dead wife. Daniel Carter lived in a quiet town in Oregon. He was 37 years old, a high school history teacher, the kind of man who preferred quiet evenings, old books, and long walks by the river. Emily had been the opposite. She was loud, energetic, the kind of person who made friends with strangers in grocery stores. They met in college, married 3 years later, and spent the next 9 years building a simple, happy life. Until the night everything ended. It was raining. Emily was driving home from visiting her sister. The police report said her car hydroplaned on the highway. She lost control. The crash was instant. By the time paramedics arrived, it was already too late. For months, Daniel couldn't step into their bedroom without feeling like the air had disappeared. Everything reminded him of her. Her coffee mug, her half-finished novels, the little sticky notes she used to leave on the fridge. Don't forget milk. Call your mom. Love you. 3 years later. The pain had softened. It never disappeared, but it had become quieter. Until the letter arrived. Daniel found it in his mailbox on a Monday morning. Plain white envelope, no return address. At first he assumed it was junk mail. But when he looked closer, his chest tightened because the handwriting on the front looked familiar, too familiar. He stared at it for almost a minute before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. He unfolded it slowly and read the first line. Hi, Danny. If you're reading this, I hope the weather is better than it was the night I left. Daniel felt the world tilt because there was no doubt about it. The handwriting was Emily's. Every curve of every letter, every tiny detail, it was identical. He read the rest of the letter 3 times. It wasn't long. Just a simple message about missing him, about hoping he was taking care of himself, about remembering the way they used to watch the sunset near the river. But the date at the bottom of the page made no sense. It was written only 3 days earlier. Daniel tried to convince himself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone was playing a cruel prank. Maybe it only looked like Emily's handwriting, but something about the letter felt real, too real. He drove to Emily's sister's house that evening. Her sister, Laura, answered the door. Daniel, everything okay? He handed her the letter. Laura read it slowly, then looked up at him, her face pale. That's Emily's handwriting, she whispered. I know, but that's impossible. I know. They spent the next hour comparing the letter to old birthday cards Emily had written. The handwriting matched perfectly. Same loops, same spacing, same little heart she used instead of a dot over the letter I. Someone had written this letter, and whoever it was knew Emily better than anyone. 2 weeks passed. Daniel tried to forget about it. He told himself it was a strange coincidence. Until the second letter arrived. This time the envelope had a return address, but it wasn't a person's name, just a small P.O. box number. Inside was another handwritten message, longer than the first, more personal. It mentioned something no one else knew, a private memory. A night years ago when Daniel and Emily got lost driving through the mountains. They ended up sleeping in their car, laughing the entire night. That memory existed in only one place, Daniel's mind and Emily's. His hands started shaking, because whoever was writing these letters shouldn't know that story. Daniel rented the P.O. box listed on the envelope. He waited. Every morning before work, every evening after, days passed. Then finally, someone showed up, a woman, early 30s, dark hair. She looked nervous, like someone doing something they weren't sure about. Daniel stepped forward. Are you the one sending the letters? The woman froze. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she nodded slowly. My name is Sarah, she said, and Emily asked me to send them. 3 years earlier, 6 months before the accident, Emily had started writing letters, dozens of them, maybe more. She gave them to Sarah, her coworker, along with one strange request. If something ever happens to me, Emily said, mail 1 letter to Daniel every few months. Sarah never expected to use them, but after the accident, she remembered Emily's instructions. Daniel sat in silence, trying to understand. Why would she do that? He asked quietly. Sarah smiled sadly. Because she knew you better than anyone. She knew you would pretend to be okay. She knew you would try to move on too quickly. So she wanted to remind you that love doesn't disappear just because someone is gone. Daniel walked back to his car that night holding a small box. Inside were dozens of unopened letters, each one addressed to him, each one written by Emily. Letters from the past, waiting to reach the future, sometimes the people we lose, find a way to speak to us again, not through miracles, not through ghosts, but through the love they leave behind.